and welcome to Comm Majors. I'm Brian Costello.
I'm Jim DeSanto.
And I'm Katie Winklevoss. That translates to snail voice. Did you know that? That's true. And we're joined by a very special guest this evening, host of the Pop Addled podcast, sultry voiced bartender extraordinaire, and just general great guy, Timmy Parker. Did
Hello,
I get his
everybody.
name right?
Yeah, it's me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really psyched to be here. Was especially excited to talk about this movie. I actually, for the first time, watched this in quarantine. I had never seen it, and then when you guys asked for me to do it, for podcast, I was like, oh yeah, perfect, because it's actually already fresh in my mind, and I wouldn't mind rewatching it.
All right. And so today we are talking about what happens when a supervillain creates something that could destroy the world.
Oh,
with The Social Network. But first, let's talk about what we are drinking this episode, or AKA the only segment that Chris Monero listens to.
Yeah.
Let's share some drinking. Let's share some drinking choices.
An old fashioned that I made a double. It was a giant old fashioned and it's halfway gone already.
Oh, well, that's good information. Let's wrap this
bodes
up.
well for this episode.
Katie was doing nighttime with the kiddos, so Jim made me something delicious. What am I drinking, Jim?
It's basically I had to adapt the recipe because we're out of certain type of bitters, but it's what we call the Belvedere, named after our street.
Yes.
I always like
it's basically whiskey, honey, lemon, and ice.
All right.
Could we market a canned Belvedere and sell it?
People do like getting their beverages in a can these days.
People love beverages in a can now.
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wine in a can.
Maybe we could do it as an Appetites on Main special. Like we could teach Tim how to make it. By the way, it builds up, gets notoriety in the greater Westchester area. Next thing you know, we're canning it.
So I think without the bitters, I'm going to call this one the Phoenix.
The Phoenix. Okay.
Okay. Lovely. Tim, what do you have in store for us?
Little Tito's Club. Lime, that's it. I feel like every time I'm on this podcast, I dial up like the whitest part of my body to bring a cocktail on.
You did not have you didn't have an appletini.
As Ron Swanson would say, clear liquor is for rich women on a diet.
That's interesting. Timmy, I have a question. As someone who occasionally makes drinks for a living, do you go all out when you make your drinks at home, or is there a lot of shaking, like the professional, shaky, breaky the icy, breaky.
Shaky. Do you say shaky as you shake
we
drinks?
watched our mixologist
into your ear often?
She does it in her ear. She's listening for the ice to break down. That's what she does.
Can I get you to stop that?
You're trying to mimic like the bartenders you see on
Bar Rescue.
Yes, on Bar Rescue.
We haven't watched Bar Rescue, but our little mixologist teacher, that's how she do. That's what she does.
We watched the master class on cocktails, and it was pretty cool.
To answer your question, no. I mean, I did a little fun during quarantine, but normally when I get home from a shift, I'm also a beer drinker, so I just crack a beer. That's pretty much it. Because I was on the podcast tonight, I was like, well, I got to get a proper beverage, especially because I feel like the last few times I've been drinking those spiked seltzers. So
that is true.
I love a spiked seltzer.
Love those spiked seltzers.
I really do.
You never need to class it up for us. We are not high class, so
I love it.
Feel free to bring your appletinis.
A bartender. Question: would you be willing to be on the show and discuss the amazing Tom Cruise film Cocktail?
Oh, hell
and
yes.
tell us how accurate it is from a bartending perspective.
Absolutely.
I love that idea. All right. I am drinking a brand new Shoveltown Brewery release, Can Be Dextrous. It's a beer that can be consumed by holding it in your right hand or left hand. Hence, Can Be Dextrous.
It's clever.
It is a New England style pale ale, and it is refreshing and delicious.
Right. Lovely. Do you have a long sleeve jersey on today?
I do.
I didn't know they made
Ted
those.
Lasso would like that.
Yes.
He likes the long sleeves?
Long sleeve. All right. Fact check time. I am so leery of
We're gonna do it. I'm gonna pull it over. I'm gonna pull it over in front of your face.
So Katie was able to, let me intro it, and Katie, you take it from there. Katie was so intrigued by the zip line scenario in Air Force One Go.
That I reached out to one of our commenters who just happens to be a physicist to find out, what's the answer to this question, which you'll hear me summarize with a lot of dog barking in this clip that we're going to share.
I'm going to pull it over in front of.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Here is the follow-up question. So plane A. Yeah, there's the dog.
All right, that's enough of that.
Okay, so
we're done with that.
Plane A is in front of plane B, but plane B is at a higher altitude.
Let me talk about
line
this.
between the two. Could somebody come down from plane B to plane A with the air resistance that would be involved? That's the question. I summarized it well.
Yeah, in the movie.
We don't need all the details.
Well, saying plane A and plane B is very confusing.
All right. They are unloading Air Force One of the
Air
final
Force
hostages.
And the other plane.
Air Force One is higher and behind a plane.
Yes.
By about 40 yards, 50 yards. And they are ziplining from the higher plane that is behind the other plane to the lower plane. And Jace, our physicist, went ahead, and I'll just give you a snippet of the way his brain works.
Yep.
Into the cargo bay of plane A, or would the air resistance of those two planes in flight drag them back up the line?
I love it.
Great question. This is a great question. I might assign this to my students. So listen, here we go. We got to consider the forces on this body. This is that dude from the movie. I don't know who it is, but this is just a blob now for our purposes. So
So we'll share the whole video so that everybody can get it.
It's fascinating.
I want
now just
the
fast
whole
forward
video,
to the
and
end,
I want
though.
Katie's video. I want
we'll put them both
on
up because you're going to hear
media.
Scout telling me that there was a mouse in our house. So in the middle of my video, Scout's like, "There's a mouse! There's a mouse!"
Here's the end of Jace's video. Let's hear what he says.
successful, plane B has to be at a 80-degree severe angle above plane A, which I don't think they were in the movie. So maybe that helps. As a footnote, the cliffhanger scene with the stuntman who actually did this for real, he was doing the opposite. So he was ziplining from plane A to plane B, and plane A was ahead of plane B and higher in the sky. So not only was gravity pushing him down the zip line, but the drag force was helping him.
Yeah.
All I heard there was cliffhanger, which I love.
The amazing thing after all of that is that Jace got the numbers out, and when we post the video, you'll see he went into it.
Brilliant mind style.
It's a lot of information.
All you friends who are taking AP Physics, you're going to geek out on this. It's fabulous.
You will geek out on it, but I will tell you,
that could be something huge. I think
common sense will just tell you after all of that, with all the numbers, all the fancy, all the degrees. Common sense would tell you that won't fucking work.
He actually includes that into his scientific explanation.
Okay.
Yeah, he does. The common sense piece
would have gone down after the 5th Uzi battle that took place.
But wait, he speaks to that
it
too.
Wouldn't have even got to the zip.
He said you would have noticed decompression because those guns are powerful enough to pierce the aluminum hull.
Yes.
Now, but he did not speak to knowing what Air Force One is made out of.
Okay.
So there's that as well.
Have an ethical question here.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. I don't like you with ethics, but we'll try.
Could he force his students to like, share, subscribe, and review our podcast for extra credit?
No. Next.
Okay. Let's move on. Game of the Week last week, we discussed some other films from that year.
Yeah.
And I just have a correction.
Yeah.
I said that my best friend's wedding I would watch before Air Force One and all the other. I then watched my best friend's wedding.
It's a terrible movie.
And it is fucking terrifying. It is a terrifying film about a sociopathic individual. Julia Roberts' character should go in the pantheon of most disturbing characters in film. It was more disturbing than Midsommar.
What about Paul Reiser in Alien?
Ooh,
he's the highest.
Close.
His character is always highest, biggest scumbag in any movie ever.
Let me tell you something.
He doesn't look like a scumbag though.
That's why it's like perfect. In that movie, he does though. He does in the
Julia
movie.
Roberts, right? So we look at I watched that movie and I was shook to my core.
Brian was shook to his core.
That America this was a beloved comedy in our country.
It's something about Julia Roberts that makes terrible movies.
To reflect on what the 90s really were.
Yeah.
If that was deemed to be a movie that Americans loved.
Pretty Woman's the same way.
Yeah, it was.
She's
my best friend's wedding.
She's the key. Like, she is why that movie works at all.
Let me tell you something. Pretty Woman, I would watch 10 out of 10 times over watching My Best Friend's Wedding.
I don't think I can rewatch it.
You do not watch it.
I just
and then
need
finally,
to hold on to the nostalgia.
So we can get into the movie.
Yeah.
Last week, I said I would fact check the delicious beer that I drank. This is, in fact, a true Trappist brewery.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
All right. This is, in fact, the first and only Trappist brewery in America.
The Monks.
So I highly recommend.
I love it.
It was a delicious beer, and they have a website and everything, and you can track it down.
Not just a bunch of dudes into techno rap.
No.
Okay.
These are monks.
Traps.
Rundown time. I don't even know where we are. Let's do rundown. Do we have the rundown music?
We do.
Apparently, you guys had a lot to follow up on with Air Force One.
We did. There was a lot of questions raised. True.
You should rewatch it, Tim.
Yeah.
It's excellent.
It's not.
It is better than Pretty Woman and My Best Friend's Wedding, though. All right, here we go. Katie, what do we got?
The rundown. A very smart but socially stunted Mark Zuckerberg invents Facebook while an undergrad at Harvard. He envisions it as a way for the Harvard world to connect. Lawsuits ensue. No? It explodes overnight. I'm sorry, I messed that up. It explodes overnight, and then lawsuits ensue. First, from the Herculean-sized Adonises he stole the idea from. Second, from his best and only friend, Eduardo, who gave him the algorithm and the bank account to get started. In the end, no, everyone ends up rich, but no one ends up happy. Aaron Sorkin is one of those people.
The algorithm was for Face Smash, something totally
true.
different.
That was for Face Smash.
He did give him the money.
Yeah. Okay.
I did love
Fair.
the Beautiful Minds moment.
And I'm just going to fact check really quick.
Yeah. He didn't go to Harvard?
He did not envision it as a way for Harvard students to connect with one another. No, he never really says that. He just envisioned it as a way to get people on a website all at the same time.
You're right. There was no altruistic. There was no positive.
He was just looking for any ways to
make money.
You'll notice that like a lot of the things he brings up in the first quarter of this movie are all around, will this be used and why will it be used?
Yes, true.
All right. Can I just say as a structure for this, that a lot of the actual stuff that happened in it is disputed by some of the people in it.
Oh, you think?
So, and by the way, I should add that I think the characterizations of people may be very true. But I mean, so when I think we're going to be talking about in the scope of the movie, when we're talking about the movie, and then we could feel free to discuss how we feel about these people in terms of their impact on society.
We're talking about the characters in the film.
Yes.
And so like, this gets the Sorkin treatment. Humans don't exist like this, right? So like what he does on the screen here as far as writing, because Sorkin wrote this, right?
Yes. He won the Oscar.
He won the Oscar for the screenplay. These people don't exist. Mm-hmm. None of these people are what they are in this movie. It's just to support what Aaron Sorkin wants to say about this movie.
But so, yes, I 100% agree with you. And I was thinking about how we've commented on movies like Just Mercy for, criticizing what they do with character and discussing, is it because it's too close and maybe the screenwriters and directors care too much about like insulting folks who are still living. Aaron Sorkin doesn't give a flying F who hates him. And maybe that's one of his gifts.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Because he just writes a story.
That's
right?
why he can ruin To Kill a Mockingbird.
There you go. Because he doesn't care. Exactly.
What is the saying? Cocaine is an amazing drug.
There you go.
Cocaine's a
right.
beautiful drug.
And so I mean,
hell of a drug.
this is one of those stories that got me Googling things because I was like,
Yes.
I don't know these people. This is a whole world I don't know about. A lot of this is
get in the way of a good story.
No,
right?
but a lot of this stuff is documented.
Yes.
Like the specific details of the story are documented.
But
personality.
But what makes this movie interesting is all those little personality quirks that come through in the moments that are not documented.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, yes, the lawsuits exist. Yes, we know certain things definitely did happen and certain things transpired. But how they transpired is more important to the movie than that they transpired.
Yes, agreed.
Because in this movie, he's trying to tell a theme of, like, what drives a person to create Facebook and bring it to the level that it reached, right? Like, and you could probably write a very similar movie about Jeff Bezos. You know?
Oh, true. I'm surprised they haven't actually.
Or even Sean Parker, the guy who did Napster in this movie.
I don't know that there's any company that has risen to that level. Like, take Jobs, right? An amazing film. But I don't know that there's a company that has risen to the level of any of the companies that we just talked about behind one person that does not have this level of, like, intrigue about it because of what happens when people get left in the wake of $1 billion idea.
Yeah. When people realize how much money is at stake, they become horrible humans.
Right.
Well, so for Tim, my question is this, because this is fascinating. So your first interaction with this film was recently.
Yes.
So we know Facebook, we know like mine was when the movie came out. So obviously Facebook was still big in 2010, but it was nothing in people's like it was now. So I remember seeing it in the theater, loved David Fincher, thought it was really interesting and cool, but it was more of a movie to me because, again, Facebook hadn't influenced us in this level.
That took me aback when on this rewatch, seeing that it was directed by Fincher, because I always thought it was like a Sorkin movie, but no, it was just written by Sorkin.
Yes.
Fincher directing this is a very I want to call it strange, just interesting choice.
Well, I was because I don't know if we'll get back to Fincher directing. I want to bring it up now.
I want to talk about that a lot actually because I think
then
it's really
let Tim continue then. Let Tim continue.
Well, so yes, I think if I would have seen this in 2010 or 11, whenever it came out, I would have been like, this is an amazing movie. This should win all of the awards. But now, like this is like the biopic, like algorithm, for lack of a better word, on a movie about the social network. It's like, The Darkest Hour. It's like, well, it's fine. Yeah. Is it factually correct? I don't really know. I should probably read a book to get the real story. Same with like what happened with Bohemian Rhapsody versus what I think is the tenfold better movie is the one about Elton John. What the hell's the name of that?
Rocketman.
Rocketman. Like that. Like I don't need a movie to like. It's borderlining on documentary. Like, just give me a fucking documentary. Whereas like this isn't like dramatic enough or like fantastical enough like Rocketman was to be like entertaining. But this just falls in this middle ground like Bohemian Rhapsody did. And it's also not necessarily true to the character. It's like the story being told, I think, is best summed up in that scene in the very beginning when he's in that bar with his, at the time, girlfriend. And she flat out leaves saying that, like, you're just obsessed with everybody thinking you're a nerd when you're actually a fucking asshole. Yeah. And then at the very end, when Rashida Jones is like, you're just trying to convince people that you're not an asshole, or whatever she says.
She says
you're convincing people that you are an asshole.
There it is. And that's like the story being told, I think, by Sorkin, which is fine. And I appreciate that. But I agree with Jim that like the like characterization of I keep wanting to just call him Zuckerberg in this is like, I don't know if it's necessarily true. Like, I'm sure he was a douchebag and cutthroat and very, shrewd to get to where he was. But I don't know if we needed to really paint him as just like the villain. Like, he was really awful in this movie.
I don't necessarily think he was very awful in this movie. And I don't know whether that's me just I don't know. I appreciate that story, the story that Sorkin's trying to tell, because I think there are so many people even outside of the tech industry that struggle with that exact problem that he's trying to sort of like shine a light on, which is like, you know, he basically changes his behavior. Well, it's not his behavior, but his belief in what is driving his behavior, right? Yes. Sort of goes from being, I'm a nerd, so I'm never going to be successful in getting girls and being the popular person. And when Mara Rooney says that, or Rooney Mara says that to him, it flips to, oh, I'm an asshole and I'm always going to be an asshole. And that sort of gives me free license to be an asshole and just blame it on this is who I am. That is such a story of like the postgraduate, like 20s life, I think, that I think this movie's pretty important.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Because I think you're right. I mean, we meet him when he's still an undergrad. And so, you know, when you think about that period of development, right? Yeah. He's certainly not fully formed as an adult, right? So you're watching a teenager.
Never in this movie either.
You're watching a teenager.
Is he now still when you watch some of these Senate hearings?
Well, and then there's that piece of, you know, folks that are like that good at something that oftentimes there's other parts of their personality, other parts of their brain that, you know, it's not odd for somebody to be sort of socially stunted. And so when I look at his character in this film, I see somebody who lacks social skills, is very insecure, is looking for anything that he can find as some feeling of power and control in a world that mostly feels off limits for him. And so the like hacking programming like that's his gateway. And then you take somebody like Sean Parker who gives him the bravado of like, and now you can barrel into boardrooms in your pajamas and tell people to F off, and he embraces it. Like, well, I can do that too.
Right, but I think Sorkin does a good job of balancing all the different aspects here. Like, because in the beginning of the movie, he's playing him against the Winklevosses and the traditional Harvard man, right? And you quickly learn that that's all bullshit as well. Yep. Right? And then you learn that Sean Parker's all bullshit. And so, like, every step along the way, the kind of idea that he's the bad guy of this movie is not really true. Like, he's the nemesis to these other people, but they're not good people. And they're not morally on higher ground than him. They're just playing within a rule set that they've been taught. And he's saying, like, you're willing to do all this and that, and I'm just doing what I want. Like, I don't understand why there's a difference.
So also, to go back to Brian's question, like it was difficult for me watching this now because after the 2016 election, I deleted my Facebook. I was only on Facebook for my podcast. I was not interacting with anybody. But then once I found out all that shit, I was like, I'm done. I'm good on Facebook. So I already was predisposed to hate Facebook. And then I watched this movie in quarantine. So it was like, it's tough to give this an unbiased eye. So I'm already going into it kind of hating Mark Zuckerberg, especially as he like goes through court hearings or Senate hearings or whatever, you know, to like explain what the fuck his company is, which he like, it's still like nebulous as to like what exactly it is. So yeah, it was just, it was difficult to like give this a fair shake, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think as a history teacher, I use Facebook now and Zuckerberg, and I use Bezos, and I use Steve Jobs when we do Carnegie and Rockefeller and Vanderbilt and Morgan, because the stories are similar in terms of this idea of, in some respect, they are in terms of, and actually, I would argue, though, somebody like Zuckerberg might have it harder because of the antitrust laws and things. But again, this idea of, and I think we've talked about this before, like, you know, when we did Hell or High Water, but in a sense, it's just like he's doing what he needs to do. And I think Jim's right, like this moral equation, like, is he the villain here? I think the only place you might look and say there's an aspect where he could have made a better choice, where is his relationship with Eduardo.
100%. Yep.
And that's like and I think that's a sense of just enough good editing, enough of Fincher taking the strengths of Aaron Sorkin, because like the Winklevosses, this could have in lesser hands, I think, turned into like, oh no, we love Zuckerberg thing. He's taking down the man, who are the rich Winklevosses who are doing this, and Sean Parker and all this stuff. He's different. But I think Jim's right. I think he is the reality of the situation to build something like this. The unfortunate reality at points is, that nobody is perfect, that you make those choices. He's no worse. In fact, to me, if I had to say a real villain in this, I wouldn't even say it's the Winklevosses. I think Sean Parker is like the devil on his shoulder in some ways at points.
In the movie.
Yes. I'm not saying him as a person, but I'm saying like he is selling something that's not real. Like, my point is this: Mark Zuckerberg did not need Sean Parker.
I think you're wrong. I think he did need him, or he wouldn't have been there. Like, like things that when stuff starts to like scale like that, like Sean Parker, whatever he did and just taking the movie at value, he gave Zuckerberg
that meeting,
not just the meeting, but like he gave him the confidence to continue down the path, right? Of like holding the line of like, because the one thing that in this movie that is 100% true and is sort of it's not glossed over because it comes up a lot, but I think everyone forgets it because it is the reason he makes all these shitty choices is the whole analogy of like, you want to end the party at 11, right? And bring in, could you imagine in 2001 or not 2001 in whenever this was, what,
20,
2004-ish, I think.
4-ish.
Even imagine in 2009, 2010, pop-up ads on Facebook for your local diners and whatever it may be. It ruins the experience. Like, that line that he held was why the platform became what it was, and gave them time to come up with the way to expose marketing in a way that is sort of not obtrusive
for society.
Right. Whatever it may be, that question still needs to be answered, right? But I think my opinion is that if he was, in the movie, he seems instrumental in that decision. Sean Parker does.
So
I would agree. That's fair.
To clarify what Jim's saying is like Eduardo was in New York doing his internship, but he was on the side, like trying to work out some like advertisements for those like banner ads on the side of your website for, a bullshit small website. Whereas Sean Parker was saying, no, don't settle for those banner ads. Keep expanding, and this will not even need banner ads. Is $1 million isn't even cool. You know what's cool? $1 billion. That's not a joke. Like that happened. Like, and so like when you start to think about that, I don't think if we just take the movie and we don't go outside of what happens in the movie, Sean Parker's instrumental in that. It's also a moral dilemma of like, well, by then siding with Sean Parker, this like kind of morally decrepit person, yes, you will have this blow up and make more money. But they were probably already on the path to make some money with Eduardo's plan. And also, if you go with Sean Parker, you're going to inevitably burn that bridge with Eduardo. You're going to lose your friendship. The only guy who he says over and over again that I was your only fucking friend. Like, so are you willing to just live with that the rest of your life? Fine.
Yeah. And it's not presented in the movie as a necessary choice.
Right.
It's not.
He could have handled that way better.
It feels like there was a path between these two extremes.
But and another thing that I think Sorkin does with the script, and Fincher didn't really change anything here. I don't know, because I haven't read the script, but at the very end, you just get the text of like who was settled and that there's undisclosed amounts, right? For some.
So who knows? I didn't research. Who knows how much he actually got?
I did.
Yeah. But the biggest important part of that is that it happened, right? Not how. So like, he eventually just did what he should have done originally, right? They should have gone to Eduardo and said, "Listen, we don't need you bouncing around New York trying to do what you're doing. If you want to do that, you know, we're going to buy you out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, come in and do something for the company, or we'll buy you out." Instead of, the behind the scenes backstabbing
that they did. Yeah.
Right.
I found that to be one of the most interesting scenes on rewatch was this is also very reminiscent of Molly's Game, where you're seeing like the present time, and then they have these flashbacks as to like catch you up onto the details of what happened to get to this point. And Eduardo's in that room with like, I guess the Facebook lawyers. And then we cut back to present time where his lawyer is across the table from Zuckerberg. And she's saying, "Did you know you were signing your death certificate?" And like, they don't elaborate on what that was. Cause initially he was supposed to be like 30-something% of the company. And whatever he signed said that I guess he wasn't anymore.
I can explain that.
Well, all his stuff was liquidated down, right?
Yeah.
So any stock sale lost his percentage.
Right. So what they did was they started to sell additional shares of stock. So like, if there's they had 100 shares. And so if we break down the percentages, Zuckerberg owned 70%. And Eduardo owned 30 or whatever. There was like 10 in there for that other guy, Devin or whatever. And then they brought in Sean Parker and he got 6 and Devin got 6 and Zuckerberg owned 51. And then the new angel investor owned whatever. And Eduardo went up to 35. Right. And so like they basically did set a trap. They're like, you're going to own more shares. But what he signed basically said that whenever they issue new stock and they make 200 shares instead of 100, which now means that your 30 shares are worth less, right? Instead of taking from every owner's piece of that to provide the new stock, they were only taking from Eduardo's. So like everyone else retained the same amount percentage-wise ownership of the company while his went down.
So, all right. So like this is back to like the biopic thing where if you're going to live in this, like, this is a factual chronological events of how Facebook came to be. And did you get that from the movie or do you just know how like,
I just know how company ownership.
Yeah. That's how
works.
That would work. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's a grade A. I mean, that's a
shitty thing to do. However,
shitty.
Remember, this is a fucking kid who, for the first time in his life, feels like he is on the right side of like doing something.
And the way that Eduardo responds to that acknowledges just that, right? And again, we don't know what was actually said in that moment.
Yeah.
This conversation does happen in front of a room full of people. And so you wonder, like, were there reports of how this went down, right?
I think there very much
But Eduardo comes right back to their origin of, was it you who put the article in the paper, right? Yeah. Is it because I got into the Phoenix? Like, he's dialed into the way that Zuckerberg's brain works and his psyche works, that like it could be just that little slight. It's so funny. I'm just reading Cask of Amontillado with my students. And that whole story by Edgar Allan Poe is basically like two best friends where one of them is harboring such a grudge that has, developed and festered over years and years that was never communicated. So it's completely unknown to the other person. And then the one ends up murdering the other in this horrific way. But it's presented to us as like, only known to one of them.
This sounds like me and Keenan. I mean, this is absolutely what's going to happen.
The weird thing is that he's going to fucking kill you, dude.
Yeah, when that's the
twist.
Make sure you have the. I thought,
Timmy, do you need any HD DVDs in the wall?
It has the Lifetime sticker on it. I thought that, to me, this is really, because we've done recently Aaron Sorkin. We did A Few Good Men over the summer, which we enjoyed. We loved it. Other than the soundtrack, the soundtrack episode from this movie, amazing, won the Oscar, by the way.
Oh, such a good soundtrack.
Amazing.
By the way, starting and ending on two amazing songs.
Yes.
Starting with Ball and a Biscuit by the White Stripes immediately places you in a place and time, I think. At least for me. And then ending with Baby You're a Rich Man, which is just a great song.
Yeah. Awesome.
Beatles, right?
Yeah.
So good. I thought that Fincher, who I like and can be eclectic in his film choices and stuff like that, is in some ways, I think, a great pair with Sorkin.
Agreed.
Because the editing of this movie won an Oscar, but the way this was kind of, I was at points thinking about what I liked about Hunt for Red October versus Air Force One, which is there's so much constant motion, long shot. There's so much going on in a Fincher shot that it allows Sorkin to be at peak Sorkin with this like unhuman dialogue and monologues and all this stuff. But you're not as aware of it because so much is happening in the way he cuts it, in the way he shoots it.
Interesting.
And I love that.
See,
I think that opening scene is one of the best opening scenes to a movie ever.
I turned to Katie right when it was done. I said, that's as good as Honey Bunny in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
That opening scene of them the two characters just talking for 5 minutes straight.
99 takes. By the way.
So wow.
Fincher's the crazy Kubrick guy.
So
he wants 1,000 takes.
I will say that Fincher's palette and lighting are dated in this.
Well, I think it depends. Maybe. I think it depends on the film. I do think, I wonder sometimes with the choices for that, because I don't disagree with you on that.
Yeah. So much of this takes place at night or in dark spaces. It's a dark, which makes sense for college, because when I think about college, wasn't up a lot of time. But but it does have that Seven, Alien 3 kind of there's so much shadow in this movie.
I was just going to bring that up. I mean, coming from the guy that made those two movies, it's this is color wise kind of in line with those two movies,
right? And it has that very of the time.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I feel like that's also thematic.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Does that speak of the tone he's trying to tell here?
I think so. But that's Fincher, so I don't know.
Well, no, but I think that there are scenes that don't feel that way. I think you go into the office scenes. I don't think they feel dark. Mm-hmm. I think there's a contrast in this movie, and not that that's that's supposed to be a framing. Yes, yes.
I do think they're cold, but I do wonder if that's why he made that palette choice.
Yeah, I'm sure,
because there is a coldness to this film.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure if that's his reflection on who Zuckerberg is, but there is a detachment from human emotion. In many ways, the Winklevosses are robotic.
I was going to say, but except when you go to that regatta, that was beautiful.
Yes, but they are robotic. But that was also very cold.
Yes,
but it was a very cool palette.
Yes, but they are robotic.
That's
right?
Sunshine at a crew race where people should be cheering and that's basically the Kentucky Derby of England. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it is. It's a sunny day, but all I get is that there's a machine going. The soundtrack, them rowing, everything. I think that's cool.
But Jim, I think a machine's perfect. I feel
and they
so
lost
much of this is that they are all parts of a machine.
Right.
Like Zuckerberg thinks he should be part of this machine and he can expand. No. And there's only small pockets. Maybe he wants to break out that nobody can break out from this. There's so like, there's people who think they have emotion or think they have ideals and stuff like that. But everybody is like, you know, even Eduardo wants to be this billionaire capitalist that can finance something, right? But is he really? No. Does he have the ingenuity to go do that? Sean Parker is a fraud, maybe not in real life, but in this movie, like, right? People are doing cocaine. He gets arrested. He's like, oh, this is my EpiPen and my inhaler and blah, blah. You know, it's like all these, are any of these people real? You know,
no, and I think
real here.
I think on more viewings of this movie, that sort of is what bubbles up, is that I think Zuckerberg is the only one in this movie that realizes they're all in the same fucking game, and they're not willing. Like he's basically like, you're not playing the game right, so like you're out, or like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like that's how his character's thinking, is that like this is all part of like a competition to something that I will get to, and
well, that feels like it's all the program. Right, that's all just code, and that's it.
Well,
there's no human connection, right? And so then when we see him at the end looking up the ex-girlfriend on Facebook,
that is that scene.
That's it. That's his moment.
Waiting to see if she's going to accept the friend request and keep refreshing.
I would say, like, first of all, that character is a fictitious person.
Yeah.
Completely made up. That was the one thing. There's not a lot that bothers me about this movie. I from just a filmmaking perspective, I'm really impressed by it. I thought it was a little heavy handed in that last sequence when they're like, oh, you know, Mark, you are a good person. You know, you are.
With Rashida?
I just was like, okay, like, yeah.
I don't know, but I think that
was important. It was important.
I thought that point of like.
But is he? I maybe if I saw it when I saw it in 2010, I was like, okay, maybe this guy is turning the page. This experience.
No. You're only focusing on the first half of that sentence.
She says you're trying to be an asshole.
I know.
But I see that, right? Like where there's moments with him and the people that can see through his facade, right? Yeah. Who like have his number.
That's why Eduardo is so upset. Mm-hmm. Right, that's why he feels so betrayed, is because he knows that this isn't his
who
friend.
He is. Yeah,
and that's why, you know, towards the end is when he flashes the Facebook business card that says, "I'm the CEO, bitch." It's like it's Sean Parker coming out in him.
Yes, he's mimicking. He's Sean
totally
Parker,
absolutely
right. That's who he's supposed to be. I thought, as I watch this, I always find it really intriguing with like people like just the real Mark Zuckerberg, right? Mm-hmm. That there is, if you look at them, like Jobs, you brought up the movie Jobs, but
which is also incredible movie.
But the book, if you ever want to read an amazing book, read Jobs, his bio by Walter Isaacson, which is just to get an insight into these people. There is a disconnect. You know, for better or worse, they are visionary in terms of how they understand people. Like clearly Mark Zuckerberg, better, worse, or whatever, he understands people.
He understood the motivations of those around him.
It might be difficult for him to interact with people, and I think that's true in some level. Jobs was similar. They understand what people want, which is amazing. Like they're visionary in that, but they don't seem to be able to have that basic human connection in some respect, which I always find fascinating about these people who are these amazing game-changing people in society. That like Steve Jobs was, no offense, but a pretty horrible human being if you read Walter Isaacson's book, but he understood human nature. Such a like Zuckerberg has created, for better or worse, something that people are drawn to.
You know,
and that's fascinating. Human nature, he understands it.
Human nature on like a grand scale is, you know, they can understand that, but when it gets down to like having a single conversation with a single person, when that person doesn't meet those same expectations that the group mentality does, it becomes very difficult for them to navigate, right? And I think they're kind of showing that in this movie. I also think I kind of cracked the code on how Sorkin writes the dialogue, which is like, I'm going to ask you a tough, like, personal question, and then you're going to just talk about something that has nothing to do with that for like 2 minutes.
You're going to rant for a really long time.
I'm going to start reacting to those 2 minutes to you. And then at the end of the scene, you're going to say, why did you ask me if I was gay? Which bring it right back to the first question. But next scene.
Babe, this could be our end.
I know.
I was going to say, like, this is one of those movies that for me is an insider's perspective to a world that is completely unknown. So, like,
well, it is. Can we?
No, I will say, like,
this world though. Is this real?
Yes, 100%.
Is this real?
And
I don't know. Is that a real world?
As like someone who's worked in like tech programming world for however many 15 years, I'm on the outskirts of like people that have made that money, not even close, right?
But just the thought.
But I was part of a technology company that went from making $1 million, when I started, hadn't even made $1 million a year, to I don't even know how much, 50 million a year or something. A lot when I left. The shit that happens in that rise, and that was a 10-year rise. In this movie, we're talking about like, what, 3 years maybe?
And being led by teenagers.
Right, and being run by 20-somethings.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we started this company in college, what the hell would have happened?
You can't...
We wouldn't have, but we also would have ran it into the ground immediately.
Yeah. You can't...
Combine a lot of Miller Lite.
You can't imagine. And so, like, when you think about people like Steve Jobs and you think... I would also like to think about the other people that we don't even know their names, who have had these ideas and haven't been able to hold that line.
Think about the beginning of Silicon Valley, where they show that graphic of like things that rise and things that fall.
Right. The great show. He's talking about the movie or the show.
Fantastic show.
And like, I mean, so Zuckerberg is just one of the many in a long line of these people that have been part of this rise and fall, and some rise to fucking just astronomical, status.
Yep.
So like, I know we've been shitting on Zuckerberg for pretty much this whole episode, but like, he's just one of many.
Well, and he is. And you know what? The line between visionary and grade A asshole is success. Like if you are successful to this like visionary level where you create something like this, the leeway that society is willing to give you is huge because you're and
I think that's interesting. I don't know if I agree with that. I was going to say, like, for me, I look more what have these people done in the time since they've been and 19 years old.
That's a good conversation to have now.
Because so now they have so much money, right? Like when you start comparing their net worth, like Eduardo is worth $13 billion and then Mark is worth $100 billion. Like at that point, it's like, that's the same.
Well,
I mean, like $100 billion. Right? Like
I always say, once you get a B, at the end of how much money
exactly.
You have,
It's a billions, right? So this is Smurf money now. And so then looking, and even like the Winklevosses, not as many billions. But what have they done? What have they done with their wealth? Right.
And then you look at like
wealth comes power.
And you know what's funny?
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned someone
and that somebody showing us what not to do with it.
That looms large over this conversation that is doing the right thing in Bill Gates.
Yes.
And so like he not too long ago. Well, no.
With the things that he has funded.
We can tell how he built his fortune. No.
It's
a whole other discussion.
Well, yes. Okay. Yep.
It doesn't matter. That's what we're talking about, though.
But does it not matter? So, like, Andrew Carnegie was the richest man in the history of the world at the time he did it, but he built that wealth through killing people who worked in his mills. So do you ignore that because he gave all the money away at the end, or do you?
I'm pretty sure that Bill Gates didn't kill anybody, though. So like,
well, in reference to this scenario though, didn't Bill Gates like have a partner? Wasn't it even like some big name that I'm missing right now?
Well, Steve Jobs was part of the. They knew each other early on,
right?
Yes,
and there's a Wozniak, I'm sure, of Microsoft, but
so there's a little bit of like, IP stealing going on, maybe
stuff like that. My point, I guess I was saying this stuff happens all the time to get in our discussion.
But I don't want to talk about that. I wanted to talk about the original point of like,
go.
Of like, as these folks get older and start to realize what's more important.
Fair point.
The Gates Foundation and what they're doing with the pledge, like he's gotten Warren Buffett and other folks of that caliber to basically say that they're giving away 70% of their wealth on their death to charity and to other foundation, like literally changing the world.
Because yes, and so there's that idea of,
and Rockefeller did something similar, by the way.
When I was saying this is a world that I didn't know existed, I meant growing up a kid in like rural America. My concept of wealth, I honestly thought like I have the people in my town who are like doctors and lawyers, and they live up higher on the hill. They live on like 3rd Avenue, because the higher you go up, the more expensive the houses are. That's where the Yinglings live.
Were they drinking?
That's where the Yinglings live.
High school teachers like you.
No, my high school teacher lived on the bottom. He was on Main Street.
Were they drinking there as well?
So there was a tiered system, right? So that was my like local wealth. And then in my mind, then there was Oprah, right? Like then, there were celebrities,
the queen of daytime,
right?
TV,
and so, I got that there were like people who were right. There was like somebody who ran this company. I got that.
Gelman.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like but I'm serious. So like this notion of like the Ivy League elite
weird world, isn't it?
That notion of like non-famous million and billion dollar wealth. So like what now I understand is like the 1%. In my mind, that was a small population, right? I didn't know there was this whole like internal structure to our country that was fueled by inherited wealth. Well, right? Like I didn't get that.
And that's important for this movie too.
Very real.
Is that when we look at this movie, he's the only guy in this movie that should care about money, and he's almost the only one that doesn't.
He doesn't. That's fair.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Zuckerberg. I think he's less concerned. I will say this, and I agree. There is a big difference in my mind between Bill Gates, even though I question if you look at some of the things he did, and Zuckerberg, in the sense of this, that it is very much when you get to the top of the mountain, what you decide to do there.
Do you help other people up?
And Bill Gates has taken, I think, a very different approach. And maybe Zuckerberg's still younger than Gates was when he made that switch. Where I do think Zuckerberg's at a point where now, and there's been talk about Sorkin and Fincher doing an updated like look at 2006, which I would be kind of interested in, honestly. But he has a choice to make. Does he go the Gates route, or does he do what Steve Jobs did? Steve Jobs gave nothing to anybody when he died, and
wore
there are
awesome
people,
black mock turtlenecks.
But there were people who will worship him, and I don't want to make it seem like we should not validate that he has created something that has changed things. But I do think you guys are right in the sense that there is the ability when you achieve this level of status that you can be reflective of what has happened, and you can begin to look at what you've done and say, you know what, maybe how I got here wasn't 100% right, but now I have the power to change the world in ways that maybe even certain governments.
Yeah, I think Jobs specifically is one of the only like celebrity people that folks have a really easy time separating their work from their personality, right? We talk about that all the time with like musicians and actors, and it's so easy just to be like, yeah, he was a genius. His design aesthetic, the things that he was able to accomplish, put his personality aside. I can worship that without putting the man and his actions on a pedestal.
And he died. So in his defense, he could have had a moment at some point where he was able to like a Carnegie and Rockefeller lived long enough that they were able to do that. Yeah. When you watch this movie, as we end with this, what's your biggest takeaway? I mean, this is interesting. 2010, and Tim, you guys talk about like films of the early 2000s and stuff like this. To me, this is a movie looking back where we do start to turn the page a little bit and find, I think, some more interesting storytelling in 2010 and on, where we give people like Fincher an opportunity, to make movies. Like, this is an odd movie because there's nothing that jumps out that says this should be commercially successful, but it works.
That's a great transition though, because I did want to talk about that. This is an interesting year. Like I'm just looking at the Oscars for directing. It was The King's Speech, Black Swan, The Fighter, Social Network, True Grit. Like, that's a great lineup. This was a really good year for movies. Those are all movies
I'd watch. Yeah.
So maybe this is like, I don't want to speak in hyperbole or whatever, but maybe this was the year that we're getting out of the like early to mid 2000s movies that just were mediocre at best. Your Mission Impossible 3s, where they're just like,
watch out, Timmy.
Fine.
Watch out.
I know. I'm sorry. I don't mean to tread on, eggshells here.
You're gonna start something. Start something fresh right there.
But I guess the overall takeaway is that I know we've done a lot of criticizing. I talked about how the biopic thing kind of rubs me the wrong way nowadays. But overall, this is a good movie. This is a good to maybe great movie. It is very well done. It's very well shot. I enjoy watching this movie. I just want to make that point clear. The only other thing I wrote down is just how on rewatch, like initially I thought Zuckerberg was even a bigger asshole because I truly thought he was stealing from the Winklevosses and not stealing, but like rat fucked Eduardo.
Yeah.
So, but then on rewatch, like I don't know if he necessarily stole from the Winklevosses, but it was just like this minute piece.
Yeah.
Like he was already there with Facebook, and the last piece was the .edu or the .edu web email address.
Yes.
That was it, because he wanted the exclusivity and they gave it to him.
Well, it was that in combination with the relationship status, I think.
True.
Yes.
But didn't he come up with that like in talking to one of his buddies?
Well, yes, depending on how you see it.
But it was, that was my point, is that it's even minimized even more, I think, what they brought to the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a modern context, what they brought to the table is almost nothing, which is really interesting.
Right.
Because when it first started, you did need that EDU, because Jim and I were already too old by that point. I mean, we were out of college, and I remember my brothers having it, but I was like, well, I don't even have an EDU. I can't even get this. And so that is something that is slightly dated about this. If you watch it and you didn't live through that time period, you're like, dude, it's Facebook. It's all over the world. You use whatever email you want. So what's the big deal that you had this idea that it was going to be exclusive? But I do understand at that time, Jim, that would probably be a really important piece of what it was.
Yeah. And what do they say?
I think though, I'm sorry. So first off, like when it first dropped, I was working at the UPenn hospital. So I did have a penn.edu email address so I could sign up. But I'm sorry if you can hear my cat crying in the background. Also, to like come back to the fact that like we're talking about like Silicon Valley and corporate America, like at its maybe worst, where it's cutthroat. And once again, like going through this movie again, I'm like, I don't know if he really stole anything from everybody. I feel like he did this mostly on his own. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
No, I agree. And Katie and I were sort of about to start that conversation last night. I minimize what the Winklevosses brought to the equation because I think I know a little bit
about what would go into that.
But
like the creation.
No, not about struggle. That. Go ahead.
there's a non-disclosure involved, right? And so a lot of what is being told is just conjecture.
Right.
You don't actually know
how
it went down.
In this movie, as far as the movie goes, I would say that like I think they do a pretty good job. And Tim brought up while you stepped away that even, and Brian brought this up actually, in now currently what the Winklevosses brought was even more minute than it was back in the day. So the
problem is the trail of evidence, though, that's created with their communications to each other.
No, it's not that is. So, like, no, what I'm saying is, like, I think what they don't do a good job of showing you in this movie is how much the other stuff that Facebook developed was why it got to where it is.
Fair
not
point.
the
100%.
Yes.
100%. I am not disagreeing
the
with
relationship status being like.
But intellectual property is a tricky slope.
Listen,
right?
Do you know what the interesting thing to me is, like watching this now, so far removed, is I do feel everyone was compensated probably appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Well, they are all worth
exactly,
billions
and that's
of dollars.
that's interesting because I am no Mark Zuckerberg fan at all, but he again is a visionary, and when you look at the money other people got, the reality is most visionaries in world history have done worse than Mark Zuckerberg, and I feel like I'm defending him here.
Everybody who was involved was able to basically go the rest of their lives because of their original involvement in Facebook. In the
scope of the history of the world, that is
the rest of their life is funded.
That is usually not true.
No, you're right. You're right. Nobody really got like screwed out of money.
That last
they're killed. They're like, I mean,
that last conversation between him and Rashida Jones is basically like, it's a speeding ticket. You're trying to be an asshole. Yeah. What's important is moving on and not being right.
So that's the difference. That's the difference, right? So if he had invited in, that's all of it, right? That's the difference with the twins. That's the difference with Eduardo, right? And that all of this could have been all part of moving forward instead of him feeling like he had to.
And this is where I say, where I'll say Aaron Sorkin does him dirty is instead of making that moment where he settles with everyone a moment of growth.
Yeah.
He basically doesn't show that at all.
That's fair. Yeah.
And he shows him sitting at a computer, refreshing the screen, waiting to see if his ex accepts his friend request.
Aaron Sorkin is also an asshole.
Aaron Sorkin is Mark Zuckerberg.
Yes, they are the same person.
Yes, so like that's great, Katie, because like I didn't even think of
Katie, that is so. They legitimately, Aaron Sorkin, he is in some.
He understands what people want.
Yeah.
Yep, and he's going to do that.
Yeah.
And listen, we
got to end there because it's perfect.
Yeah. That was the perfect. We are validating your point.
Thank
Katie.
you.
Validating your point.
I feel seen.
We got to move on.
That was the best point of the entire episode. Game of the week. Here we go. It shows all downhill from here. It's all downhill. All right. I am validating Katie by playing her least favorite game of the week.
Oh, this is a good
I'm actually okay with this one. I feel good about this one.
I think I'm okay with it too.
Own it, skip it, one or done. All right. So let me explain my thought process here. Tim, of course, was on for one of, I think, all of our favorite movies of 2020. One of the only great things about 2020 was our Midsummer episode, which if you have not listened to it, by the way, Comm Majors is now available with all episodes on YouTube.
Not all episodes, but
most episodes. Midsummer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mm-hmm. Social Network. And I also, Tim, like I and many, love Christopher Nolan. I threw in a classic Comm Majors episode, Inception. Those are your three choices. Mm-hmm. Which one are you going to own? Which one are you going to skip? Which one do you think you could watch one and be done with it? And let's go with Tim first. Let's let our guests go first because we're usually rude to our guests.
Damn it. I thought about this a lot. I feel like own it means that it needs to be the most rewatchable. And it has to be either Midsummer or Inception based on that. And
this is the tough one, I think, right?
Exactly. There's a lot to pick up on rewatches with Midsummer, but Midsummer's also so bizarre and fucked up that I don't know how many times I want to rewatch it. So I got to go Own It, Inception, One and Done, Midsummer, and skip it, The Social Network. I don't think my life changes without seeing The Social Network. I mean, hell, I watched it this year and my life really didn't change now that I've seen it.
All right, perfect. Katie,
I was going to say, I need to go because I've got to go get our dog who's harassing the neighbors. I loved Midsummer, and I want to rewatch it over and over again because I just feel like there is more to be found there. So I'm going to own Midsummer. One and Done, The Social Network. I do feel it caused me to think about like my relationship with Facebook and all of those things, right? Like I can't just walk away. I can't. Like I feel like I've invested my like time and photos in it. Right? My memories, like literally shots. It is how I remember things. And Inception was not a game changer for me. So I'm okay. I'm okay with it. It gets me twisty in the mind. Yeah. All right. I got to go get our dog.
Jim, what do you got?
I think I'm the same as actually. Yeah, I think I'm the same as Tim. I'm owning Midsummer. I am. I
was owning Inception.
Oh, okay, so we're three different ones here. I'm gonna own Midsummer. I'm gonna One and Done Inception, and I'm going to skip The Social Network. However, I will say to Tim, I think Inception is a lot more messed up than you're giving it credit for. When you really think about like what goes on with him and his wife, it's pretty effed up.
Sure.
It is.
It's a little more subtle.
It's subtle. It doesn't play out on screen like it does in Midsummer, but it's pretty effed up.
This is a tough one. Unfortunately, I think for me, Social Network is the skip.
Yeah.
But I love it just because I think there's other Fincher films that I could pick. I do think it's a really good film, well worth watching, and it's on Netflix. So almost everybody has a Netflix subscription, so you could watch it. The challenge of this one to me is Midsummer or Inception. Midsummer, which I think is stunning and brilliant. I own Inception. I've used it for classes and taught it. I feel like that is the one I would probably. I own it, so I feel like I have to say that. I also own Midsummer as well. But if I look at it, which one, if I only watched it one time, could have an amazing impact on me, and I could always discuss it, and if I never had the ability to watch it again, would still stay with me, and I'd be okay with it, is Midsummer. That first time I watched Midsummer, if I was never able to watch it again, I feel like I still could always feel something about it and share it and not have to revisit it. And I would still take something away from that experience, where I do feel Inception, which is need of rewatch to be able to get it, which is easier to understand than Tenet. And Tim doesn't know this yet, but he's going to come back in January and watch Tenet with us, because I put it down. So he'll be back in January to watch Tenet with us, because it will be out for video release at that point. Is even a bigger mindfuck than Inception. But I'd say I'd own it. But I think, by the way, you could watch, if you got some free time, why not watch Inception and Midsummer back to back sometime?
I just want to, like, not in a braggadocious way, but like, I'm so glad that like I've spread the wealth of Midsummer to so many of my friends. That is the thing with
Midsummer.
I watched Midsummer literally
solely because of Tim.
The trailer went because of you, and that is the one movie when people ask me which movie should I watch, I always say watch Midsummer.
It's not just you guys. Like I told this to people at work, and like people who aren't even movie buffs watched it, and they still talk to me about it to this day. This is a movie that came out in 2019. Like,
sneaky
you can
movie.
still talk about it to this day.
This is literally The Shining. This is what happened with The Shining.
It's
nobody
different
at the time
though, because
went and saw
I feel
it.
shitty after watching The Shining.
Yeah.
And I don't feel shit. And I think that's the trick
nobody
of that movie.
Watched The Shining. Like, people weren't willing to watch it.
I'm not nervous to like The Shining haunts my dreams. I'm not nervous to rewatch Midsummer.
There is something cathartic about Midsummer that
it's amazing.
That That is good.
There's like a primal karmic something to it.
The reality is you can watch Midsummer every 6 months and get something from it. And that's pretty damn rare.
And if you wanted to watch it as like a piece of literature and study the dialogue and study what story they're telling on screen, it's amazing. If you just want to watch it technically and see the colors and see the
cinematography and everything, you can watch it at all levels.
It's great. Watch
Midsummer.
We should just do a Midsummer podcast.
We should. I've said this in our group chat with Keenan. I've said we should just have one of those 1 minute podcasts where you discuss only 1 minute of a film every day.
Yeah, we'll do 100 minutes of a podcast.
Plus on just episodes. All right, time for 5 questions. Here we go.
You want answers? You want answers? I want the truth! Makes a man, Mr. Lebowski.
What the fuck is the internet?
There's some Aaron Sorkin dialogue and some Kevin Smith dialogue.
That's a little bit of everything in this one. All right, 5 question time. I love, recently we've been on this run of having amazing guests, and we get to ask the guests questions, and it's awesome. All right, here we go. 5 questions. Tim, thumbs up or thumbs down? What is your feeling on being friends on social media with exes?
Oh my God. I mean, big thumbs down. I mean, there's just no question about it. I mean, when I was in my younger 20s, did I stalk my exes? Yeah. But it was super toxic, super just, there's no like advantage to it. Like it's terrible.
I think I'm only friends with one ex on Facebook.
Yeah.
You're talking to also the guy that's only on Twitter. So
that's true.
I don't have social media.
You're the most toxic of all social media. All right. So it's this. Katie, are you friends with people who you were involved with in some way?
So I think there's a tier of exes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
So that's agreed. So let's phrase it this way. Are you friends with people on social media that you were involved in a relationship with?
Yes.
Okay.
But like, was I in love with those people?
Well, no. Okay, well, we can move that.
So I'm saying,
can just be someone you were involved in.
Right, I think you can be friends on social media with people you dated.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a situation of evaluating, is this going to be healthy for me or not? Because not all of them.
So let's play a game. If you are friends with somebody on social media who you were involved in a relationship with, drink.
Oh, can I tell you that Lily DeSanto found one of Mom's college photo albums the other day?
Oh boy, I don't like that idea.
She literally said to me, "You kissed a lot of boys."
Okay,
that was funny to me. I was like, I don't think I took any pictures of that. And
that's an episode in itself.
So then I looked through. I was like, oh no. It was just you guys. It was just, I was like,
picture, let me kiss
That's just friendship in college, is like you just do like weird things with your touching. There's still a lot of touching, but no, I wasn't kissing those people.
Okay. All right.
I didn't take pictures of the people I kissed.
Question 2. That would be interesting. Tim, would you rather watch a Justin Timberlake movie or listen to a Justin Timberlake album?
Justin Timberlake albums, I'm not that familiar with. I think the last one I know pretty well is the one that had like Love Stoned on it. I forget the name of it. But I think it's easily movie, because I think this movie, for one, I mean, it's not necessarily a Justin Timberlake movie, but
it is. He's good. He's a big role.
And he's very good. Trolls was another one. And I think this is kind of underrated. Doesn't get like talked about a lot, but In Time as a sci-fi movie, I thought was decent.
I never saw that one.
Is that
Trouble with the Curve is great
as well?
Trouble with the Curve is a good
another one.
Oh, that's a good. That is a good movie.
He's an actor in something else.
He's in a lot of
like
stuff,
enjoyment from Justin Timberlake movie versus his albums. Like just there's specific songs I really love of Justin Timberlake, but an entire album,
Okay, fair. All right, question 3, fill in the blank question. If you could create a new social media platform, what would you name it?
I have a guess on what Timmy would name it.
I gave 3 answers. I feel like, just to cut to the chase on like a variation of like a Tinder, just call it Smash. just what are we doing here? What's like Tinder? Cute? No, like we're fucking here. Like just call it Smash. Or a specific Now, I don't know how you would do this, but blue collar workers in Pennsylvania, exclusivity. You see where I'm going here, and call it gritty.
Dude, that was the one. That was my guess.
You can only log in
with the union card,
with like a union ID number or something.
I love that.
Gritty.
Do you know, by the way, I was watching like Conan and they had this on. There's apparently a Tinder for celebrities. You have to be verified as a celebrity.
Oh.
And you can go on and it's other celebrities who are in the area that are available to meet up.
It's very interesting.
Like there's like a tier of celebrity. I can't remember what they were talking about it.
All right.
That is very weird.
Yeah.
The last one I was just going to say, like,
what's the last one?
Something just like Pennsylvania related also, but just call it Quaker State. And you have to just give like a Pennsylvania license ID number.
Isn't Quaker State already used as like a diner? It's like, it's an oil.
Oil. It's an oil, but it can be
Quaker State and it used to be old gas stations that they converted to this restaurant chain called Quaker State and Lube.
And that reminds me of that place that we stopped at on the way down to North Carolina that was a gas station that also had a Mexican restaurant in the back. It was so good.
Yeah, that was a good
Remember
place.
when we used to stop at the Beer Cave?
The Beer Cave. That's in Delaware.
Man.
Beer Cave was
Remember
awesome.
before quarantine when we would go places?
Yeah, remember places?
That?
Remember places,
Remember
guys?
life before you had kids?
No.
Sometimes I think about that.
I'm living it.
You live in La Vida Loca
Enjoy every minute.
Tim, here's a question for you. The amazing Andrew Garfield was in this film. Of course, in The Amazing Spider-Man. Who is your favorite cinematic Spider-Man?
It came down to, I think it's like either original Tobey Maguire, one of the, is it Tom Holland? Is that his name?
Yep.
Tom Holland. Yes. Very good.
Or Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
And after long,
definitely count. Yes, absolutely.
And after long thought, it's got to be Into the Spider-Verse. It's
Who
so
is
good.
what's his name?
Miles Morales.
No. Oh, no.
Oh,
It's
you
not-
like the? Oh, yes, he's a different Spider-Man.
What are you saying?
It's what's his name from the new girl,
Yeah, Jake something.
Jake Johnson.
Jake Johnson.
There it is.
Okay, so
He's actually Peter
I
Parker.
really don't like Tobey
sorry,
Maguire.
Yeah, Tobey Maguire is terrible.
They're-
I have to say, Tom Holland is everything. So go ahead.
He's great. No, I'm just
He's everything that you want Peter Parker to be. I think Miles Morales is awesome. I hope they introduce Miles into the MCU soon.
Spider-Verse it was so refreshing to remind people that you don't need to be part of this giant universe to be a good superhero movie.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even need to be live action. It can be animated. That movie's incredible. Sorry. Keep going.
Agreed.
It is amazing.
No,
it is amazing.
Right there with you.
Finally here, deep thoughts question. Heavy question here. Which of the following tech giants do you think will be the most powerful by 2030? Google, Apple, Amazon, or Facebook?
That's only 10 years from now, by the way.
I know.
A lot can change in 10 years.
I know, but look at that number. That's in your head.
Crazy.
Yeah.
We're going to be 50 years old.
When Brian sent me this, I was like, wow, 2030. Wow, that's so far
We're going to
away.
be.
But you're right. It's only 10 years
We're going to have hoverboards.
Right. So I think with what's going on in Congress and litigation in general with like Amazon and Facebook, I feel like they're going to get squashed somehow. Google, as much as I love their products and as much as I use them online, they haven't got into like streaming. They haven't got into like really components or anything. Whereas Apple kind of has their hand. They have irons in what is the term? You know what I'm going here.
In the furnace.
You got a Keenan moment here. Why don't you do?
Yeah, Jesus.
Irons in the fire.
In the
They
fire.
have irons in so many fires that I think Apple will be the biggest of those four.
Jim, what do you think?
I think Google, just because of the amount of data that they collect.
I think Amazon because they own the cloud.
They're currently being
They
sued.
do. AWS.
Sued a lot.
Yeah.
Amazon Web Services, and this is the part of the Amazon business that no one knows about, but they own almost all the servers that every product is being run on.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Actually, also look at, if you're ever looking up Google, look up ABC Corporation, because they changed their name for all corporate holdings.
Yeah.
So you can dig around to see what they own, which is really interesting.
It's a crazy like mind fuck, but Jim is right where like you hear cloud and you think like, okay, I'm just like given this free hard drive, but you have to understand there is a physical drive somewhere in the country. Like there's server
multiples.
warehouses somewhere
that's duplicated across the world.
God
So like
knows
if one
how
gets
many
flooded,
places.
another one pops up ready to run and your stuff is on it like nothing.
Exactly.
So like your data is duplicated, your pictures are duplicated all over the world.
And someone owns all that shit.
Yep.
And somebody's
It's Amazon
catfishing using your pictures.
And Google.
Just be aware of that. Tim, of course, as always, let us know where we can find Pop Addled, which this week, Tim gave us amazing knowledge on The Mandalorian, while Keenan makes up bullshit that's not true nor factually relevant.
Everything that we
to
expect.
the story of the company. Where can we find Pop Addled, and what's in the future in the Pop Addled world? What do you guys have coming up?
We are on the horrible Facebook. I am on Twitter. Keenan runs
Mark,
Instagram.
if you're watching this, I'm sorry. Tim's an asshole. Or he's
We're
trying
on-
really hard to be one.
Make us stream
Funny.
faster.
That was funny.
Make us stream faster.
We're on all the things that you can download podcasts, whether it be Stitcher, SoundCloud, like Google Play, iTunes, obviously. I think we're even on TuneIn. And yeah, as of you're hearing this, the Mandalorian episode that Keenan and I did was probably like 2 episodes ago. Most recently, we probably will have done top 5 adult cartoons.
Yes.
So like cartoons that are like
Very disturbed by that
X-rated,
topic.
X-rated cartoons,
X-rated.
adult
non-pornographic adult
You did say
cartoons.
adult
cartoons
cartoons.
only
Anime?
on Pornhub. Make sure you're
There's a
on Pornhub.
lot of
Anime?
when you use the
lot
word
of-
adult, it just calls to
a lot
mind
of
certain
cartoon
things.
penetration.
Yeah.
Very
You gotta
disturbing.
reward that.
Is there going to be
Reword that because you're not the
cosplay?
first people to have
Are you
this
guys
reaction.
going to dress up for this
Yeah.
episode?
How many tentacles is Keenan going to have for the show?
Yeah, I'm very disturbed that you're recording this together now.
Yeah.
Like you used to be apart, now it's
And is
together.
Mandy okay with it?
Yes. Or
Is
is she
Kat okay
involved?
with it?
This is a whole new thing.
Very
That
interesting.
absolutely does not approve.
No.
Mandy, I feel like, is on board.
She is right.
She did marry
should
Keenan.
not.
She's on board
did.
for anything.
All right.
Well, we love Pop Addled every
Yes.
week, of course. In fact, we love it so much that Keenan will be with us next week if he can get a Wi-Fi connection to his new home.
Whiffy.
Which is very iffy. As next week, we will be discussing Mad Max Fury Road, because we came to a realization that we have never allowed Keenan to be on the program when we discussed a film that should ever be rewatched. So we finally decided Keenan could be on for a real movie.
So next week's Thanksgiving, so I'm not going to be there.
This, yeah,
We are-
we're not going to do Thursday. We'll figure
we're
it
not
out.
going to do Thursday.
Katie,
Probably not there then either.
Katie's, you're going to love this movie.
Oh, you will love
I
this.
know,
Is
watch
a
the movie.
feminist. This is a feminist.
You are
movie.
going to this movie is going
Is
to
this Charlize?
yeah.
Yes.
This is gonna
I love
this
Charlize.
is gonna pass
This is blow your
your
mind. when you watch
Roadhouse
this movie.
enjoyment.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, yeah.
This is so exciting. Remember, like, share, subscribe. Watch us on YouTube now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
On the
Watch us on
tube.
YouTube. I'm going
On
to
the
say
face
somebody
tube.
sent me a text saying you guys are on YouTube, and I'm so excited. Won't tell you who it was.
Was
Your
it Claire?
mom. It was your mother.
It was not my mother. She doesn't
Was it
know
my
what
mom?
YouTube is.
My mom's not
It
on
was not
Facebook
your
anymore.
mom.
Was it my dad?
It was certainly not your father. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.
All right, bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.